The first time I questioned religion, I was going to Catholic school. Before that, I was always on the drift and couldn't catch up with the currents of those around me who were religious. But I was a weird child and I retained that strangeness, so I always brushed it off as not being able to fit in and not really caring that much. By the time I actually questioned religion, I was 12 and attending Catholic school in an old, small town that I haven't missed since leaving. The first time I questioned the idea of a god, I was in class, partially. We had a bunch of classes, and since I wasn't in high school yet, it was all in the same room. In that school, I don't remember being taught science outside of random things on the surface, and I suppose that makes sense since creationism was the thing that mainly took its place. It was the kind of school where you'd be told off or corrected because you didn't write God or him with a capital letter. I was learning about how God has a perfect plan for the world and how everyone would be alright and not have to die. How the world was going to be an eternal happy playground. It had some scripture and all that, but it was mainly more slowed down and bare bones because we were 12. I found the idea of no one dying rather odd. And I raised my hand to ask a question. My question was about how God could magically stop the world getting too crowded and the resources going out. I knew there would be some sort of explanation for the resources, loaves and the fishes, if you will. But I kept hanging on the fact that the Earth only had so much space. So how would a bunch of people who never died fit without running out of space if they were still having kids? Another thing. If heaven was the reward for going through the trials of life, then why would we want to live forever anyway instead of going there? What was the point of having it in the first place? So I asked these questions, intending to have a discussion, and open a pleasant dialogue so it would allow me to believe. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to understand what everyone else did. I just wanted to find out what I was doing wrong. I wanted to come away with it understanding what the people around me believed and believing it too. But that's not what I got. The teacher looked at me with this look that I later recognized as saying a lot of things. Things such as, "Why would you question this? Don't interrupt me." And probably something to do with blasphemy if I looked hard enough. In response to my question, she waved her hand as if to swipe the bad thoughts away and said, "God has a plan. God figured it all out." Now before you ask, I did want to ask what plan. I wanted to ask why or how. I wanted to air all of my grievances, which seemed to spill out of nowhere and nag at my mind for the rest of the day. But one look at the way that the people around me and the teacher looked, I knew that I was not welcome to continue. It was best for me if I stopped talking, because I had already marked myself as someone who was not thinking about it correctly. But no one would explain to me why. Now I should clarify something. I was already a bit of a loner oddball. Because my parents had to work, we ended up moving around a lot, and I had to go to a new school, make new friends, and probably try my best to be happy with them, all the while knowing that there was a countdown for how long it would take before I had to leave again, and I would have to leave all of those people behind. The countdown usually ended at 1 or 2 years. It wasn't my parents' fault, and it was hard on them, I think, so there's no one to blame here, and that's just what it is. But at that point that I had reached the Catholic school story, I had already been in 5 schools. The 4th one was actually in the same town, almost across the road. I had moved over from there to the Catholic one halfway through the year, and at the end of the year we moved from the town altogether. At the start of the year, I started school just so fed up with everything that I didn't want friends anymore. I knew I would leave, so I didn't want to hurt myself or others by even bothering. I could have, and at first tried to be quiet and distant, but I was paranoid and stupid. I thought that people would still try to talk to me, so I decided to push further away from them. I couldn't bring myself to be a dick exactly, but I made myself appear to have annoying quirks that would make people want to hate me and not come near me. Aggressiveness and simple things like repeating everything way too often, weird comments, and generally ramping up my awkwardness until it was unbearable for me and the others. It's not something that I would encourage people to do, and it hurt a lot, but I always thought, and I was always brought back to, thinking that it was better this way. At this point in time, I wasn't yet diagnosed with depression and anxiety, so I had no idea what was going on. So I shouldered it and continued, not really understanding why some people wouldn't feel the same way. Those two things that I kind of recognized but couldn't put a face on encouraged me to keep doing this, to keep pushing people away. The point is, I already had a sort of stigma following me that was my fault, and I got looks all the time because of what I did. But this look that I got in that classroom was different. This was not the usual look of, oh, that weirdo again. This was the look like I had done something wrong. Like I have crossed a taboo line that marked me as the other, as someone to be generally weary of now because of my questions. Afterwards, when I was hanging out alone and lying on the grass with the sun on my face, something I still love to do, I thought about what I had done. I was under the impression that I had been rude and I had stepped out of line, but I didn't understand why. I thought that I was in the wrong. But then I went home and I decided to flip through the Bible that we had lying in the cupboard in our house somewhere. My parents didn't and still don't give a shit about religion, so I don't know where we got it from, but nevertheless, I started flipping through it. The first thing I found out was the way the teacher was talking about it. It was definitely not accurate, to say the least. But what was in the text did not make sense to me either. Now I think the more metaphorical parables of the Bible are great for storytelling and allegories from a writing perspective, but I still recognize it as one of the biggest things, perhaps the greatest thing that led me to beliefs that I have now, or lack thereof. I flipped through it day by day, and mostly for the whole of that year. I would continue doing that later on. I would go to class and keep quiet, all the while still open-minded and paying attention, still seeking that belief, still having that feeling that this was an exclusive club that I'd walked into by accident, and no one would explain to me why they were there. But all the while I was falling more and more into that cold feeling that I didn't belong, and that maybe I shouldn't be there in the first place. Despite me never really having religion as a big part of my life, I didn't know the concept of not believing. People always teach you that you should have the freedom to believe in whatever religion or God you want, and we should be tolerant of others' beliefs, but they never really tell you that not believing is an option, or that it's okay. And so I found myself in this kind of purgatory of not feeling right with trying to force myself into believing, and not feeling right just being so different and not understanding why. And so I thought that everyone had been created with a little part of their brain that allowed them to believe. Like a switch or a press of a button that had been installed. And I had been broken in the manufacturing process, broken in a literal sense. So my existence itself was wrong. I felt like I myself was wrong because I didn't have that bit in me installed. I didn't have the switch. The button wouldn't work. And all of those things didn't make me a normal person. It was only years later when I came across channels like The Bible Reloaded, The Drunken Peasants, and Finite Atticus that I found the word atheist. It was a strange word, and I didn't know how it felt on my tongue to say. But after a while I accepted it as something that I could embrace, because I realized that I wasn't a horrible person nor broken for believing what I did. I realized that the word for it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a branding that you press onto someone. It was a definition. It was a word that you could use. It wasn't something that had to be bad. But that was years later. At that point where I was, everything was crashing in on me. Any doubts that I had, any memories that I had depression was amplifying, and during that age of 12, I first started to think about maybe life not being for me. Maybe it was better for me to go beyond somewhere I thought I didn't belong, and maybe if there was a God I could go meet him and ask him to fix me. And I was really just sick of feeling like I was out of place. So I looked up at the ceiling of my room and quietly listened for something. If you are really there and you know what I'm about to do, maybe you'd say something, I thought. But the ceiling was just as dusty and grey as it always was. Now this next part might be a bit sensitive, but it's genuinely something that I think of as funny today. After that thought and that ceiling remaining as it was, I went about trying to find some pills. Because I was 12 and didn't understand how to go about it, I was just copying what I saw people in movies do, so I thought any old ones would work. I ended up taking a bunch of vitamin tablets, and sleeping aids, and all of those natural things that don't really do anything major. And that would explain why I just felt tired and got sick for a couple days instead of really dying. Now some people think that might be sick, but I just find it funny. And some other people think that that is God and that he intervened and that that's proof, but it wasn't. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel a revelation and stop doing it. I didn't suddenly walk into a place and find some magical people to walk into the sunset together with me. I felt empty. Nothing changed for a long, long time. I kept pushing people away, and even though I went on to find out what my lack of belief was, or why I kept feeling sad when there was no reason for it, I would still go on to try and end my life a few more times before I got it out of my system, as it were. At the end, it was me who was the one who decided to stop. I finally did get over it, but it was not from faith. It was from acceptance, partially. Sometimes I still feel odd, and it's worse in a way because I know it's not because I was made the wrong way, but because it's just the way I am. It's just that thing that everyone goes through, and I know that's coming from me. But at least I know that. I accept it. I don't need a mystical outside force to tell me that because I can tell it to myself. It might bother me sometimes, but I'm fine. Because I'm not forcing or pretending to be something I'm not. It's not that people stopped saying, "Look, there's a godless heathen." But it's that I reply with, "Yes, I am."